As a member of the Bronzeville Urban Redevelopment Initiative and a licensed real estate agent with Caldwell Banker Realty, I find myself in interesting situations daily. I get invited inside homes, I hear stories, family histories, the next step in life, and so on and so on. Columbus is known for and proud of our different neighborhoods: German Village, Italian Village, Victorian Village, Dublin, and so forth. The one neighborhood rarely spoke of and lost in the history books is Bronzeville. The story of a Bronzevillian is a bit different. For starters, what is bronze? It's a metal stronger than copper, but when mixed with other metals becomes more fusible and easier to cast and far more resilient to corrosion. The neighborhood was originally a mix of Italians, Jewish, Irish, and majority Afro-Americans who all came together to work on the railroads. The city of Columbus was chosen as the capital of Ohio primarily because it was centralized and had easy access to transportation routes, which essentially were the rivers. Columbus in its infancy stage in the 1800s had around 500 free blacks, and by the time the big migration wave came by 1920, over 22,000 black residents. And the main reason blacks stopped in Columbus as opposed to factories in Cleveland or moving further north or west was because of the Ohio State University. In Columbus, Ohio, we had more educated African Americans than any other northern city. In 1894, a group of black business entrepreneurs formed the Afro-American Association of Columbus, Ohio, and the purpose of this organization was to represent unity of its residents since there were only a few avenues of employment and business open to the men and women of our race. With that being said, Bronzeville was by design, having every business and neighbor tending to every need. Black doctors and dentists with degrees from Ohio State, hat makers, barbers, small grocers, dressmakers, shoe shiners, bar owners, and then progressing to building our own hospital, bank and insurance companies, churches and funeral homes, all within the community. So before the walkability measure was a thing, you could have everything you needed within a mile. These same developers and entrepreneurs that built Bronzeville then continued to honor their wives and mothers by naming great buildings after them, like the Edna, the Marguerite, and the Teresa. There was a demand for housing as well as the number of trained black real estate agents that tripled, and so by 1930, there were 18 black realtors who were closely associated with the black-owned banks. So every building that housed the business were 100% funded and built by black businesses and masons. The $1 Million Mile, also known as the Long Street and Mount Vernon, was a commercial corridor that housed great entertainment from jazz greats and lined with jazz clubs to accommodate artists traveling for the entertainment route from Harlem to Chicago, with a pit stop in Columbus. A thriving community for African American is an understatement, seeing it survived the First and Second World War, the Great Depression. Now, the first cause of any decrease in the population and economy of Bronzeville occurred just after desegregation, when African Americans were taking their business elsewhere to expand. Schools now being integrated took families from Bronzeville. The second extreme blow to the neighborhood came in the late 1950s with the ratification of the Highways Act Interstate 71 and 670, tearing down hundreds of homes that were black owned. The war on drugs in the late 70s and 80s led to an insanely high rate of incarceration, which robbed the black family of basic rights, the ability to raise our children or even vote, combined with non-incarcerated families being redlined. The tension that is now happening from today is from festering wounds from the past. For example, lynching. Lynching defined is the murder of an individual without the regard to legal process, to due process. In many cases, law enforcement could look the other way. The anti-lynching began this legislative process back during the civil rights era in the 60s and only just passed in 2018 because the killings of African Americans without due process was too much for any human to have to go through. And as Americans, we must acknowledge our past, inform our present, and create our future. The Long Street Bridge is the beginning of bridging the gap between the divided amongst us. Not only does the artwork honor our ancestors and visually see a friendly reminder of where we come from, community leaders working with ODOT spent over $25 million to make sure the bridge could supply electricity and lights to have restaurants to accommodate over $100 million being spent on development today. The board development team listened to the community for the Adelphi Quarters project with roughly 9,000 square feet of commercial space and 130 boutique apartments, and continued tradition with honoring a living legend, Ann B. Walker, an African-American woman of many firsts. The Bronzeville Neighborhood Association has collaborated with Bethany Presbyterian Church to build mixed income housing. Arch City Development is seeking to build 750 East Broad Street, a 4-story building with 36 apartments. Our city is developing like rapid fire, and Columbus should be the metropolis that leads by example. We are literally the heart of America. We have been told that you are as weak as the weakest link, and this is only half the truth. we are also as strong as our strongest link. I encourage everyone to help fulfill our work in knitting back the fabric of Bronzeville and sustainable development for all people. And remember our great history and come together and make America not great, but even better. Thank you.